Well, hello, I'm Marge Braker and I'm with Preserve, and today we're going to make small batch fresh strawberry jam because strawberries are in peak of season right now in Oregon. And this is a very easy recipe, and it calls for fresh strawberries sliced, and I have 3 cups here. And if I were going to buy fresh berries in their little pint basket, I would use about 1.5 baskets of berries or 4 cups of whole berries, but basically it's 3 cups sliced berries, 1 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice that I've pre-measured. And today, just to add a little interest to this small batch strawberry jam, I'm going to add a tablespoon of diced candied ginger. And you could add more, but I recommend that you start with just 1 tablespoon unless you really like hot jam, because sometimes ginger can really add some heat. And then stir this up, and then I'm going to move over to the stove, turn the heat on high, and just start cooking it. And the advantage of making a small batch jam is that it cooks very quickly. And you're using a smaller amount of fruit and sugar, but you're also doing it in a wide pan. And the wide pan allows for the moisture in the fruit to evaporate quickly. So you end up with making a jam in about 10 minutes. You make a small amount, about a cup and a half. It depends on how much evaporation is needed. And you end up with so what I like about it is you can have strawberry jam in small amounts, and then maybe some plum, and maybe some apricot, maybe some peach, without having 110 jars in your pantry. So I like small batch really well. You know, berries are one of those, especially strawberries, they hold different amounts of moisture. And so sometimes this batch will cook up in 5 minutes, and sometimes it'll take 8 minutes, just because of the amount of, if it's been real rainy and how big the berry is, how much water it's holding within its tissues. And alongside here, I have a bowl that's sitting in some ice water. And this is one of the steps that you will want to do ahead of time so that you have a nice chilled bowl. You could also put it in your freezer, because when this starts to boil and gets to the stage where it's starting to thicken a little bit, you want to test it. You're going to test it to see whether it's gelled yet. And a jam like this is not going to be you don't want a real stiff set. You want a jam that isn't overcooked. That's one of the nice things about this recipe. So go ahead and start testing it, and I'll show you the steps, but you need to have your bowl chilled ahead of time. So this is starting to boil. Smells lovely. You could use an electric skillet as long as you keep stirring. Sometimes they tend to heat spot. This is really a rolling boil now, and so you can see the steam coming off it. A lot of moisture evaporating fairly quickly. Okay. Starting to form a syrup. Still a lot of liquid. And it is almost ready. I'm going to turn down the heat. And I'm going to do a little test to see. First I'll take off some of this foam. And I'm going to take about a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of the jam. I'm going to put it in my cold bowl. I'm just going to let it sit there for a few seconds. And if it runs, and see how this runs not like a syrup, but it's just starting to set up. I'm going to give it another minute. And then I am just going to go ahead and put it in a jar. I'll turn up the heat a little bit. This jam is not precise. That's one of the reasons I like it. It's kind of guess, and no matter how you do it, it's delicious. And if it's a little bit too soft, I say put it on pancakes. The only thing it probably won't work for is a peanut butter jelly and jelly sandwich that you want to take with you, because the jam might just run out of the sandwich. Okay, I'm calling that good. And at this point, I'm going to fill the jar. And this is since it's such a small batch, I'm guessing I'll make one 8-ounce jar. And I'm going to have ready a 4-ounce jar. Make sure there. When you're making jam and doing anything with a boiling water canner, you have to have one of these handy gadgets, jar lifter. Okay. And get my hot pad. Start putting my jam in the jar. Oh, a little blop there. I'm going to fill it to about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And then I have this handy little gadget I like, which is a magnet for my lids, which have been soaking in boiling water. Well, I forgot one step here. Always be sure you wipe the rim of your jar so that you don't have any jam that might interfere with the compound on the lid and prevent your jar from sealing in the canner. Put on your ring, and it gets hot, and then just give it a little tight. Okay, put that in the jar, and I'm not using a big water bath canner. I'm just using a big soup pot, because as long as I have 1 inch of boiling water over the top of the jar, I don't need a huge cauldron. So you can be really flexible in the kind of pots that you use. Okay, 1/4. That's where these rubber scrapers really come in handy. A little more dab in there. And then I think what we have is enough for the little table, the table dab I call it. So I've got this little 4-ounce jar. Tamp that down. Okay, when the water comes back to a boil, then I'm going to time it for 10 minutes. The reason we give it a hot water bath is during processing, so that you can destroy any mold spores or yeast cells that may cause the jam to spoil while it's sitting on the shelf. So anything that comes out of a boiling water canner, you can just put on your shelf, and it's will stay there a year or more, and you don't need to worry about it. But with many jams, you want to use them up quickly, within a year, because strawberry, especially after a year, you'll notice it'll have gotten quite dark in the jar. But the boiling water ensures that you never get moldy jam. We're done. Now we're ready to take our jars out of the processor, and be sure when you open the lid, put it away from you so you don't get steam in your face. And then with your handy dandy jar lifters, you just pull out your jars and put them on a towel, just in case your counter's real cold. You don't want to put a hot jar on a cold counter, especially with people who have granite. You might want to be a little careful about that. And then we just let them sit for 12 to 24 hours until they're cool. And that's jam.